Still got a few people joining, but I think we can kick off. So first of all, just want to say thank you everyone very much for joining our online event here at Outreach Digital. My name is Hilda and I'm one of the volunteers at Outreach. Just a few words about Outreach before we start, just in case it's your first event with us. We're actually one of the largest digital communities on Meetup. We've got around 20,000 subscribers to our Meetup group, and we cover a wide range of topics across digital spectrum, from web development, UX, PPC, SEO, and as you'll see today, AI, and many, many more. So today's event has actually been organized in partnership with Intel. So we're very happy to have one of the Intel's innovators joining us and giving us a presentation on the latest AI solutions to look out for this year and obviously in the next few upcoming years. So in terms of the agenda, we'll have 10 minutes Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you'll see the Q&A chat just at the bottom of the Zoom call. So feel free to start typing any questions as soon as you have one, and then we'll go through them after Rishabh's presentation. So I know we've got still a few more people joining, but I think we can make a start. So I'm going to hand over to Rishabh.
Thanks, Hilda. A very warm good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who's joined in. So I'm Rishabh Banga. I'm one of the Intel innovators. And today we're going to basically be talking about, how AI impacts in not only our day-to-day lives, but in all of the industries as well, right? So before I start, there's an important link that I've pasted right at the bottom right? So this link will basically help you at the very end when I'm done with the presentation. And if you want to, begin your entire journey on integrating an AI component into your use case, right? So if you look at the link below, it's iotevents.intel.com/outreach-digital. So once you go to this link, if you haven't already registered, that is, you can register yourself and you'll get access for 30 days to one of Intel's cloud sandbox, which I'll be talking about later in the presentation, right? So a bit about me. I have close to 5 years of experience now, 6 years actually, across MNCs and NGOs. I'm currently the executive director of a startup based out of India. We are working as a non-profit and essentially concentrating towards tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 education institutions. Outside of work, as I had mentioned earlier, I'm affiliated with Intel as an Intel Innovator, and I'm also part of the advisory board for the Intel IoT software program. So what exactly is AI, right? So if you think about it, depending on where you come from, what you heard about it, AI can have a very vague definition, right? Some people will call it as automation. Some people will relate it to what exactly AI is in the first place. So that's what I'll talk about in the next slide. So if you look at the image in front of you, AI actually is called artificial intelligence, but in this case, I'm talking about automated intelligence so that you can understand, the exact breadth of what it all encompasses, right? So if you begin from the very top, you have example of main areas where you talked about deterministic rules and processes. You talk about robotics, you talk about event processing, you talk about NLP, right? And this is where, after that, we come into the entire intelligence part, right? Where it goes purely technical. And you talk about machine learning, which again has its various components. Supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning. Now, I will not go much into all of these topics. This is just a brief overview so that you know what exactly AI is all about, right? It's not just purely technical, it's not just purely automation, it's a mix of both, and it differs from situation to situation and from case to case, right? And obviously from industry to industry. So again, if you look at the example of sub areas, for deterministic rules, you have robotic process automation, you have chatbots. Now, sometimes chatbots can also come under machine learning as well. That is basically how you program the entire thing. you have deep Q&A, you have text to speech, you have speech to text, you have image to text, and a lot of different use cases, right? So these are essentially all of those things that to some extent do not require any intelligence of the computer itself, right? So when we talk about artificial intelligence, there are essentially two types. One, where you instruct the computer what to do and it'll do it accordingly, right? In the other one, you teach it on what to do, and then if a wild card comes into the picture, it will know how to behave, right? This will not be applicable in the former case. This is where the essential difference comes into the picture, right? So if we talk about machine learning, then you have an example subcase of image recognition, of classifying, and probability assessment. So how does AI work? Now, again, I will not go into the technical terms. I'll give you a very, very brief overview so that all of us can relate to how exactly it works, right? So there are essentially four steps. You have sense, you have reason, you have act, and you have adapt, right? Now, if you think about it, this is technically how we as humans also behave as well, right? So we sense the things that are around us, we sense our environment, the situation we're in, we reason, I've been in a similar situation. This is how I'm supposed to behave, right? Okay, or probably this is a completely new situation. How should I proceed? Have I been in a similar, situation where I could probably employ some tricks and techniques to get out of it? And the third part is where you actually do that, right? You perform the action, and depending on how it goes, whether it's a success or mild success or failure, you adapt so that when a similar situation comes up in the future, I now know what is the best possible a solution or best possible way of going about it. And this is in a similar way how AI also works, right? So it identifies, recognizes, it understands the context, it recommends or initiates an action based on whatever it has seen till now, and depending on how it goes, it'll adapt its algorithm on its own. Now, a very good example of this is autonomous cars, right? So in the case of a car, autonomous car, it basically senses the environment around it, the cars, whatever is coming in front of it, right? Or beside it or behind it. It will then try to understand, if the front car is braking, right in front of it. So then it has only two options, or rather three in this case, either go right, go left, or simply brake, right? So depending on what the action it takes, if it's a success, if nothing happens and there is no mishap or no scratch or anything, then obviously it knows that this was a great success, so this is my intended action. However, if something else happens, then it'll learn, right? So probably this is not the best way forward. I'll think of maybe next time around I can probably do this action and see how it goes. So the era of AI, right? So this is where we actually begin what the entire presentation is all about. So if you think about it, right, right now I'm going to talk about analytics, and consequently we go from there. So we have descriptive, we have diagnostic. These have been the traditional ones till now. We have predictive, prescriptive, and cognitive. Now, descriptive in a sense was, we had data in front of us, and we could understand what it's all about. Uh, when we came to diagnosis, this is where we tried to visualize the entire thing, via charts, via any other way, pie charts, any other visualization, which would help us make more sense of the data, right? When we came into predictive is where all these, I would say, new technologies or algorithms came into the picture, because now that you had the existing data, right, you could actually make sense of the historical data as well as the current data to predict what might happen later on, right? Prescriptive is where AI actually came in the picture, where you could run simulations and try to figure out, which was the best possible outcome. Now, this is the similar thing that I mentioned in the previous slide, right? So you sense, reason, act, and adapt. The similar thing is happening here. You run multiple simulations to, figure out what is the best way and how to go about any situation. Cognitive is where the actual pure machine learning or deep learning comes into a picture, where let the computer decide what it's supposed to do, what each action it's supposed to perceive, and accordingly behave. Now, why AI in this era, right? If you think about it, till now we were doing fine without AI. So why did AI come into the picture? Why after AI, even if it was a really good really good technology, why did we have to bring in machine learning and deep learning, right? And why did all of this end up, I would say, overflowing into all different industries? I mean, if you think about it, if it was just pure tech, right, then it would have made sense. But why is it that now, AI is in healthcare, AI is in retail, AI is almost everywhere, right? Even in our day-to-day lives. which we'll again discuss later. So these are the reasons we now have a huge data set. So data set is again the historical data plus the current data all mixed into one, which teach it to the model, you show it to the model, and they look at it and then learn, okay, this is how now I can probably categorize any future similar image or text or similar, whatever comes in the future, right? You have faster processors. So each year, the processors are getting faster and smaller. So that means now even in a laptop, right, we have enough compute power to actually run huge data sets. So this facilitates the entire process because now you can run bigger models. You can, I would say, bring in more variables into the picture so that your accuracy in this case improves. And obviously the advanced neural nets or algorithms, because they're getting refined, right? They're getting better and better. The accuracy is improving. So this means that, now with all of these three into the picture, we'll have cutting edge results across various fields. So this is a question that I wanted to, have discuss with all of you. So I guess wait for 30 seconds and I'll hopefully request all of you to, put in your comments. How do you feel AI is present in our day-to-day lives, right? I'm sure most of you will know about it, but I'd still like to, discuss later on during the question and answer section that what did you feel how AI is integrated into your day-to-day lives? So your time starts now. I'll wait for 30 seconds. All right, so those are the end of 30 seconds. Now, from my perspective, right, the best example would be any or all of our email clients, especially Gmail, right? There's a way where it can recognize, what exactly is spam, right? What email can be categorized as spam and what can be categorized as a normal email, or in this case called ham, right? So this is where AI comes into the picture because it knows, these are all the email IDs, right, which have been tagged as spam. And so this is where AI comes into the picture. Now, if I say abc@xyz.com is a spam mail, right? Now, I already told this. Now, if any of these mails come from the same ID, obviously it will be able to determine that this is spam. But what if it comes from a different email ID, but with the same xyz.com domain, right? This is where AI comes into the picture because then it'll start running probabilistic determinants that, this a similar domain name is already flagged as spam. So this might also be spam. So accordingly, it marks those as normal or spam. You might even notice in some case, even if it's in normal, right, it might suggest that, this seems like spam. So what do you want to do about it? So this is a very good example of spam versus ham and how AI fits into the picture. Another is what I talked about earlier, chatbots, right? So a lot of companies have employed chatbots into their customer service domain. Now, again, this could be deterministic, as I talked about earlier, or purely AI, where irrespective of whatever text you type in, it will be able to identify and then give you an answer properly. So in terms of, apart from the day-to-day things, these are the use cases across different industries. You have agriculture, you have energy, you have education, you have retail, finance, healthcare, and the list goes on, right? So I'll talk about some of these in the slides, right? And the first is the health industry. So I'd say based on whatever use case you have, the health industry and AI integration can differ. You can have traditional asset monitoring, can have drug delivery management. From an advanced perspective, you can do predictive maintenance, you can have remote diagnostics. There was a media report recently that a doctor from, I don't know, Europe probably was able to, perform a surgery, right, somewhere in the US. So this was again an idea of how exactly tech can integrate into a picture and how AI fits into the entire thing, right? So you have diagnosis at a distance. In terms of patient monitoring, you can have inpatient monitoring, right? So these are the different use cases. In terms of transportation, I've already talked about autonomous vehicles. And another that fits here is predictive maintenance. Now, autonomous, we've already talked about, right? So it's able to sense the vehicles. So this is where the entire concept of IoT or Internet of Things comes into the picture, that via the sensors installed on the, in this case, a car, it's able to, sense things, be it temperature, humidity, and by the camera, it can actually, do video analytics. So it gathers all of that data, you fuse it via the inbuilt processor that you may have, and then depending on the outcome that is already fed into it or whatever it has learned, it'll act accordingly. So the another use case is smart cities, right? Where we have traffic monitoring, we have interactive city kiosks, we have public safety monitoring, and we have fleet inspection. Now, another example here is, if you look at the picture here, you have smart cameras, right? And via the smart cameras, so either all of these hooked together send the data to a cloud somewhere entirely in a different city, or probably the same city but a few miles away, right? But it also could be that it's an edge solution. So edge solution here means that there might be a device very near to all of these smart cameras which is picking up the data, mildly processing it at the very place, and then probably pushing all that pre-processed data to the cloud. So this is an example of predictive maintenance, right? So this is an example where a truck is installed with a lot of different sensors. If you can see the diagram properly, you have rear, front, and hopper cameras. These are represented by number 1. Number 2 is the tire pressure monitor. Number 3 is the body scale. Number 4, life scale. Number 5, hydraulics. And number 6, RFID reader. Now, if you think about it, this is completely IoT solution, right? Where you can, it's able to sense all of this data and send it via the cloud to any data center. So the AI part that comes here is because you might have historical data that, this specific model truck, its tire pressure, depending on this, if it's on the same route, its tire pressure, required filling up, say, almost every 7 days. So now you have a guesstimate that, after 7 days, it's going to happen, but this could also happen in 3-5 days. Now, this is just one plain example. Another is if you think about the life scale. Here, depending on the type of weight it has been holding, right? It may differ depending on the cargo it's pushing. So it might, from a very small package to a huge package, obviously the delivery would differ. Now, how will we be able to guess, right? One idea is, again, that I talked about earlier, you guesstimated that, based on our experience, human experience, this is how it will happen. But now if you have the data behind it, you can get a very good idea. You can say that, I can say with 95% accuracy, or X% accuracy in this case, this might require change in, say, 1 month, right? So this is how the entire thing comes in your picture. In terms of manufacturing, you have, again, we talked a bit about this earlier. We have dashboards. On the cloud, you can have historical data, enterprise systems. So they're, continuously churning the data, trying to make sense out of it. The endpoints here, again, the smart cameras that we had in the case of smart systems. So there are smart cameras, there are accelerators. Accelerators is something that usually comes in a picture when you have an edge solution, so that it helps with the pre-processing bit, right? So again, another thing here is when you talk about edge, which is again mentioned in the bottom right, these are essentially development boards, right? Like Raspberry Pi 3, up squared board, and so on. So these are the kind of, these are also called single board computers, right? So these are the edge devices that I was also mentioning earlier that come in your picture, help with processing the data, since in the entire data, without having an entire setup of a huge computer enterprise system. Now in retail, things obviously get a bit interesting. So this was a small project that I was working on a couple of years back with Intel. This was a prototype. So essentially the idea was that in a brick and mortar system, right? So if you talk about, I would say any online e-commerce system, say Amazon, right? Again, where AI comes into a picture, in case of a recommendation system, that it sees whatever you've searched till now and based on whatever it knows from different profiles. Profiles here is, say, for example, if I've been searching for 4 items, right? So if they find out that, there's another person who fits the same profile, age, geographic location, and everything else, and they've also been searching the same thing, but the fifth item was something else. So they might suggest that fifth item to me. That people have also been viewing this. So that becomes a recommendation engine. But what if you could probably employ AI analytics into a brick and mortar system where they could also benefit from latest technology. So the idea here was that you had cameras both inside and outside the shop, and it will monitor a couple of things. Number one, how much inflow was there brought in any given day in different parts of different times of the day, so that when the peak time comes in with proper data. Not okay, uh, the person who was doing that shift said that there were probably 10 to 15 people in that time. You actually get the exact number. There were 12 people, right? If you come inside is where the actual entire thing comes into play. The magic happens, that you have cameras that are monitoring each and every location. So you can see that there's a human being, there's an inanimate object. In terms of human being, there's an adult or there's a child, and they're looking at say any brand's clothing, right? In this case, let's say it's looking at Levi's jeans. So they see that they looked at it, and and as typically what happens is they also looked at Amazon and saw that Amazon is cheaper, so let's buy it from there. And suddenly, because so this was specifically for membership people who already had a membership there, right? Exclusive members. So what happened was, so those people would get an SMS, right? That for you, this is the discount we're giving. So this will ensure that you're offering at almost a competitive price as an e-commerce website, and also ensuring that the customer buys from you, right? So this was a complex solution, but again, how actually AI and everything fits into the retail picture. So till now, I've talked about all the different use cases across industries. Now the point is how Intel fits into all of this. Now, depending on the deployment you have various tools and technologies that you can use. However, the most important one here is Intel Dev Cloud. And again, the link has been provided in the bottom half, so that if you haven't registered till now, right, or if you joined probably later on, you can actually go register so that you get access to the Intel Dev Cloud. Right. So uh, Intel Dev Cloud essentially what it offers is that even if you have a say 10-year-old laptop, right, or even if a latest laptop, but with not enough processing power. So what Intel Dev Cloud does is that it'll give you access to all of its latest tools. So if you look at the hardware here, right, you have Intel Xeon processors, which is by far the fastest processing from an Intel offering, right? You have Intel Movidius. Now, this is an accelerator that helps you, if you're employing an edge device. So what happens in this case is if you're trying to use AI in your use case and you've built your model and you want to see, how will it actually behave in different situations. So then Intel here will offer you different processors to test it out, to test the performance, so that if you're going for an edge device and if you're using Movidius in this case, then this will be the inference you will get. This is the processing time you will get. And if you're happy with it, then you can go forward and actually purchase the hardware, right? And you can do it on your own. But in this case, they're giving you an entire sandbox to do it for you. So that was the end of the session. If you have any questions, do let me know.
So I think we can start the Q&A now. If there's any questions, if you could just type into the Q&A bar just at the bottom.
So I'm looking at the chat right now, and Mastoor and Sonal, you're right. Every aspect of a Google search, again, recommendation is a part of AI, and interaction with the social media that Sonal mentioned, again, the same thing. Hilda, I can see the questions, so I'll start with those.
Yeah.
Right. Alex, so it differs honestly. I mean, with the advancement in technology, there are a lot of different ways where even if you do not have a good knowledge of maths, you can get into AI, right? But the issue here is it becomes a black box. So you do not know, what kind of performance you're getting and why. You only know that you're getting so much performance, and if you're happy with it, well and good. But if you would want to improve that performance, then you would not know how. And in this case, you'll have to, go back, learn, and then build everything from your own, right? A good example of, I would say, a black box is Google AutoML, right? So what it does is that you simply need to provide the pictures. It'll identify what kind of algorithm it's supposed to run and give you the performance, right? So it's as simple as that. But here what happens is that sometimes the performance might differ. Like if 10 people are using the same data set, the same model, the performance still might differ, right? So here is an issue that you cannot really understand what happened in this case and how will I actually improve it. I hope that helps. Tanya, how AI is used in financial services. So financial services again is a very vague term. If I talk about stock markets, right, AI is used to actually predict, based on historical data, this was the performance of a specific stock, and in the future, this might how it'll increase, right? So again, you can use maths here as well, but that is totally dependent on human beings. And if you try to do that in terms of implementing, say, a formula on Excel or any other thing, that again will not probably give you a better result because AI will keep on continuously churning the data you provide, keep on getting in variables and try to do it for you.
We've got a question from Mastor. I don't know if you've seen that one, Rishabh.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So Masoor, actually what usually people try to do is that they actually go for a different browser, right? You have DuckDuckGo, you have Opera. So if you actually, not go for Google search and use a native search or probably different search engines, Google will obviously not have your data, right? So that is honestly the best way because what happens is, and we all can agree with it, they have been profiling your data for a really long time, right? So till now, if you were looking at bikes and suddenly you go from cars, I mean, it will not be a huge issue for them because, like I said, they might relate it with some other profile, right? For example, let's say it's you and me. I've been looking at bikes my whole life, and suddenly I got interested in cars, say 2 years back, and accordingly, I was looking at cars. Now, you recently realized that you started gaining an interest in cars as well, so you started doing that. So the AI, what it'll do is that it'll relate our profiles, right, and see if it can give a better match, and accordingly do that for you, right? And another important thing here is as soon as you start searching it, as most of us have noticed, you actually almost immediately get an ad somewhere or the other, right? Be it a sponsored post, a sponsored ad on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere, you will get a reference of either a car or a sports car. So any more question, guys? Thanks, Masood.
Okay, another one from Tanya. What are the big AI trends we should be looking out for? Okay, as marketers.
As marketers.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it would depend. If you look at the current outlook, you already have ads, I would say, where from Instagram or Facebook, you can push your content, right? Sponsored ads to different audience. And AI is already doing that because they profile the entire data and it also helps you. So, I mean, if you've already done it till now, it gives you an option that, the target audience is this and this age. This is, I mean, they should be a student or some other profession. So how is it actually able to gather that data? If you log onto Facebook or Instagram, you do not actually provide all of that data. I'm a student or something like that. It's when you build your profile that where it gets its data from. So if you look at it from a marketing perspective, I would probably say that, a lot of marketing people will employ AI in more concentrated terms. Like I know a couple of people who are doing it for video analytics, right? So if you're looking at a video and if you want to spot specific items on the video itself, so AI will do it for you, right? Or if you want, and I don't know if you know about it, like even right now, facial recognition comes into picture, right? So facial recognition, what it does is that if a video is running, they'll identify specific people in that video, right? So probably marketing could bring it into their own domain. It would totally depend. I mean, I'm really not sure what exactly is happening right currently in the marketing space.
Hopefully, Tanya, that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, because honestly, I'm not sure where is it right now, but based on, I would say again, the historical data with other industries, you will get facial recognition, you will get image classification, you will get video analysis, right? Those are the main things that are going to come in as it is, right? So I would say that probably if there comes a software that learns, what has been your posting trend till now and suggests, this, you might probably put in a similar post, right? What others have been posting, which will give you a better reach or something like that. So that could be one of those things if it hasn't been done till now.
Any other questions? Oh, I think we've got. Okay, waiting on more questions. Anyone?
Yeah. Guys, it's all right. I mean, it can be a very simple question. It's more about, this was a very introductory session. So do not think it's a stupid question. Even if it's a stupid question, it's your doubt. So I'll be happy to actually answer it.
Okay, we've got another one from Master.
Masood, it honestly doesn't. Yeah, I read that question, Hilda. It honestly doesn't. It'll be able to identify from your IP address. So usually what people do here is that they start using VPN. They start using incognito mode, right? So that to some extent, I would say the trackers are unable to identify you, right? So another option is that you actually disable the trackers, but every time you refresh the session, they will come back.
Unfortunately, you will be incognito mode, no good. What's your thoughts, Rishabh?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you think about it, yeah. So Masood, these are actually really good questions, but I would say it's relatively better, right? Because in incognito mode, the purpose is that it does not save your searches, right? But again, the trackers would still be there. So you disable those trackers, or you probably put in a VPN, so that doesn't even identify your location, right? So it becomes a totally different profile. So within the same property, the same address. Yes and no. So I mean, if you look at the same properties, it'll basically be the same house, right? So even if I would say in your case, if you have a wife, right, and she's not searching for the same thing, but it can still guess, right, that they were talking about it, probably her significant other probably search for it, so they can send a recommendation to her itself. So that also actually happens. I mean, I'm sure you would have noticed this. Sometimes you're talking about it, and in either of your phones, the ad will pop up, right?
Yes, that's
So,
true.
I mean, you're not even searching, you're just talking here, and it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, because honestly, when I found out about how much it listens to it, I simply plugged it out. It's still somewhere in my drawer. And so Alexa is another thing that, and for any voice assistant, right? Okay, so let's talk about voice assistants. Voice assistants is another thing which is in our day-to-day lives. I've completely disabled it because it'll do the same thing, right? It'll keep on listening. So if you think about it, they say a specific term. So OK Google is a specific term in this case, or Siri in case of Apple. So how does it know when to listen? Which means it's always listening, right? And this is actually a study, and if I remember, actually a YouTube video, right? In which case, what happened was a news company had set up entire smart house, right? Alexa was the only device which was continuously pumping data, right, to a specific server. So it's always listening. So honestly, if you want to show off Alexa, which ideally doesn't make sense because now everybody has it, switch it off. When you're partying, you need to just say, listen to music, you can switch it on and ask it to change the music.
That's a very good point. Alex made a great point. You just set me off there by saying, okay, Google. Yeah. Yes, that's...
Yeah. So there's actually a joke behind it, right? That a couple were sharing a joke, the couple laughed, Google laughed through its own smart assistant, Alexa laughed, everybody laughed. So basically they're listening.
Yes, they're out there. That's the message, essentially. One from Sol now. Are internet providers using AI these days in any way? As I assume they can track everything you do if they want to.
Even if they're not using AI, technically, if they wanted to, right, they could. I mean, if they're tracking your IP address, which means they can track the traffic that's going from each and every IP address, which means they can, to some extent, be able to understand what you're searching, where's most of your time going on. So if they want to, they could probably, I mean, just a suggestion, please do not do it. One of the internet providers could probably say that, in this specific locality, I can see most of them are shopping at this specific time. So I can probably push in an ad, or you could probably do something similar, and then ensure that, at the specific time, you get the most reach, right? That is how it happens. I just saw your question.
Yeah, so it sounds
All
like
right, guys, any great questions? Honestly,
sounds,
all of you have been, yeah.
yeah, no, it sounds like there's a lot of concerns around privacy, would you say, guys? Around privacy and obviously, yeah, that's too. Yeah, around privacy
So,
and
yeah,
how. Yeah, so another one from Tanya.
with increasing use.
Yeah, so with the increasing use of AI across
So
industry.
Tanya, that actually has been okay. Yeah, that's a good question. If you actually look at the news right now, right, search for AI. So right now, the most of the searches will be around AI privacy, AI ethics, right? Because people, I mean, this is what happens, right? You get something new, you're fascinated about it, everybody wants it, and then you find out about the drawbacks, and then nobody wants it, right? So this is again the same thing here. I mean, you're just talking about AI here, but if you think about just the tech part, right? We are so codependent on everything, especially because now we're working online. All our searches, everything is being done from either one personal laptop or office or personal laptop, depending on how you're doing it. So both of them will have different searches, but the same profile. So think about how much data they're getting from each of us. So usually what happens is what actually Mastoor also suggested. Do not sign into it, right? Do not sign into YouTube, do not sign into Google if it is possible, right? For example, this happened with my father when I brought him a new phone. I brought him a Galaxy S10, and he was like, ever since I signed in, whatever I search on my laptop is available as a search history in my phone. I do not want that. And I said, it cannot happen. Sorry. Either you completely sign it out, the phone doesn't know, this phone belongs to this person and associated with this email ID, you cannot do anything. Right.
Yes, that's a fair point. So well, we definitely have a common thread here in terms of line of questioning.
That
Um,
is what is
another
happening, Sonal.
Yeah, another one on Zonal, from Zonal. So yes, as you said, Rishabh, I think this is already happening, right? We're already seeing quite a lot of backlash and conspiracy theories being spread around.
So again, just to correct you here, it's not exactly AI, it's bots, right? So bots will not specifically be AI, but again, they're part of tech. So what is happening is, which was again a conspiracy theory, right, between Facebook and the Trump election back 5, 6 years back, right? So this is what happened. Everybody thought Trump is going to lose, right, because of whatever was being pushed through. But suddenly Trump won, and then when people started investigating, they found out that a lot of people were targeted, right, with certain ads or certain content, which made them change their minds and actually vote for Trump, right? And I would say it's almost everywhere. A lot of hate crimes, eh, things you see online, right? I mean, even if you look at Instagram right now, especially if in India, I would say, with the entire farmer protest that's happening, you'll see two different trains of thought. Number one is, the farmers are have their own conspiracy theory and they're doing this, for their own gains. They have no problems with the government. On the other side, you find that the government is, basically not being kind to the farmers. It's for their own vested interest, for the lobbyists and everything. And there are Instagram posts for this. I mean, Instagram has no relation to it, no concern for it, but because a lot of people, especially school students and college students, are on Instagram, right? Everybody has shifted from Facebook to Instagram, so that's where everybody is, and that's where the entire content is gonna be. Because how else will you target everyone, right? For the elderly people, they'll get the newspapers, they can read it. For people my age and probably younger, or somewhat the same age group, they will not exactly be reading newspapers, but they'll be looking at the Instagram for sure. Masood, so the thing is, I mean, they probably might have. That's a good question. They probably might have. So by the end of it, doesn't matter if you're a high profile person or not. Even if all of us want to, we can at least, if nothing else, try to limit our things, right? Because, I mean, if you're continuously browsing through content on Instagram, right, that is what they want. That is how they, understand how you actually go through it. There was actually a documentary on this, right, on Netflix. So essentially what they do is they keep on learning, they keep on, again, this is where the AI comes into the picture. They'll throw a content at you to see, you've been looking at a generalized content. What if I throw a new content? How will you behave? Right. For example, you've been looking at tech posts and suddenly a picture of a puppy comes in. Will you like it or not? Most probably you will. And if you like it, then they can confirm, we can probably push in more puppy pictures, right? So that is how it happens. Yeah, must do it for social dilemma. You're right. So what is the best way to learn about AI, or the best resources? Okay, so depending on how you want to do it, right, you could go for a black box approach that I told Alex about, right? Or you could start with the very beginning. So you need to have a good level of quantitative skills, right? You need to know about statistics, about probability, because that is what accuracy is all about, right? How many items were correct out of how many items, right? So that is where there's I would say concept called confusion matrix, where you have true positive, false positive. So that is how it actually I would say guesses the entire thing and then gives you, this is the actual accuracy or the precision. So if you want to go about it, I mean, pick any specific MOOC course. Those are free actually. Pick with that, try to build your knowledge and accordingly get into it. These days, the most popular ways that if you look at just from a data analyst perspective, you can go for any data visualization tool like Tableau or Power BI, right? Or Alteryx to some extent. If you go into AI, then you can start with Python, right? That is the most commonly used language because of its libraries. You begin with Python, try to understand the programming language, because essentially AI is nothing but algorithms. So algorithms can be programmed in any language, but because Python is the most sought and the most, I would say, in right now, so that will be the best way to begin with it. See, by the end of it, a lot of people actually started asking questions. Right. So
Yeah,
if anyone has any more questions,
we've gone down a very interesting path, I think, around
yeah.
privacy, and which is
So
a very, yeah, it's very popular topic at the moment, especially with the news around, you know, WhatsApp and the privacy changes around there. I think
exactly.
yeah, there's a lot of discussion around that. Um, any other questions, guys? Okay. All right. So any other sort of closing thoughts, Rishabh?
Sure. So honestly, that was the reason I didn't include recommendation engines and voice assistants into my talk, because those are, very, I would say, touchy topics, because a lot of people are concerned about it. I mean, even if we weren't, now we are, right? It's suddenly we are woke, and privacy concern is a huge thing. So I would say, and this is a very, I would say, ongoing, lengthy discussion. Tech can be good, AI can be good as long as it's being used for good, right? I mean, if you want, it can be used for nefarious things, but again, isn't that for everything, right? So that is most important. What I'll do is I'll include my LinkedIn ID in case you still have any more questions, right? And then we can probably take the conversation forward. If in this case, if you have any questions post the meeting, right?
Great. Thanks a lot for that, Rishabh. And thanks everyone for joining the webinar. Hopefully you found it very interesting. Oh, there's one raised hand.
Yeah, it's Mastood.
So yeah, no, thanks very much, everyone. Obviously, we'll try to maybe do a little bit more content on privacy, because it sounds like this is a very interesting topic to everyone. maybe we'll do a little bit more. Okay, trying to give thumbs up. Okay,
Thumbs up, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll try to do a little bit more of that around privacy, maybe a little bit more about AI. Sounds like everyone's interested in that. So Rishabh, thank you so much for joining. Obviously, it's been great having you on the panel. Yeah, and yeah, guys, you sign up for the Intel's cloud if you're interested to find out a bit more. Obviously, Rishabh is the Intel innovator, so I'm sure he knows a lot about that. So thanks everyone, and yeah, we'll speak again very shortly at the next event.